Hi, everybody. This is Jimmy, and you're reading with Jimmy. We're reading Sun Tzu's The Art of War. This is chapters 5, 6, and 7, translated by Lionel Giles. Ready? Let me adjust this screen a little bit for you. Okay. The Use of Energy, Chapter 5. Sun Tzu said, "The control of a large force is the same in principle as the control of a few men. It is merely a question of dividing up their numbers. Fighting with a large army under your command is nowise different than from fighting with a small one. It is merely a question of instituting signs and signals. To ensure that your whole host may withstand the brunt of the enemy's attack and remain unshaken is affected by direct and indirect maneuvers. The impact of your army may be like a grindstone dashed against an egg. That is affected by the science involving contacts between weak points and strong points. In all fighting, the direct method may be used for joining battle, but indirect methods will be needed in order to ensure victory. Indirect tactics, efficiently applied, are inexhaustible as heaven and earth. They're unending as the flow of rivers and streams. And like the sun and the moon, they end their course, but to begin anew. Like the four seasons, they pass to return once more. There are not more than 5 musical notes, brackets, probably meaning only 5 employed in Chinese music of the era, brackets. The brackets are Giles' notes to us. Yet the combinations of these 5, musical notes give rise to more melodies than probably can ever be heard. There are not more than 3 primary colors, and yet, in combination, they produce more hues than can ever be seen. There are not more than 5 tastes, brackets, sour, acrid, salt, sweet, bitter, close brackets. Yet combinations of them yield more flavors than can ever be tasted. So in battle, there are not more than 2 methods of attack, the direct and the indirect. And yet, these 2 in combination give rise to an endless series of maneuvers. The direct and indirect lead on to each other and other in turn. It's like moving in a circle. You really never come to an end. Who can exhaust the possibilities of their combinations? The onset of troops is like the rush of a torrent, which will even roll stones along its course. So the quality of decision is like the well-timed swoop of a falcon that enables it to strike and destroy its victim. Therefore, the good fighter will be terrible in his onset and prompt in his decision. Decision releases force. Energy may be likened to the bending of a crossbow, decision to the releasing of the trigger. Amid the turmoil, the tumult of battle, there may be seeming disorder, and yet no real disorder at all. Amid confusion and chaos, your array may be without apparent head or tail, and yet it will be proof against defeat. Simulated disorder postulates perfect discipline. Simulated fear postulates courage. And simulated weakness postulates strength. Hiding order underneath the cloak of disorder is simply a question of subdivision. Concealing courage under a show of timidity presupposes a fund of latent energy. Masking strength with weakness is to be affected by tactical dispositions. Thus, One who is skillful at keeping the enemy on the move maintains deceitful appearances, according to which the enemy will act. So by holding out baits, he keeps him, the enemy, on the march, and then with a body of picked men, he lies in wait for him. The clever combatant looks to the effect of combined energy, and he does not require too much from the individuals, and hence his ability, the clever combatant, to pick out the right men and to utilize combined energy. So when he utilizes combined energy, his fighting men become, as it were, like unto rolling logs or stones. For it is the nature of a log or stone to remain motionless on level ground, or to move when on a slope. If four-cornered, to come to a standstill, but if round-shaped, to go rolling down. Thus, the energy developed by good fighting men it's like the momentum of a round stone rolled down a mountain thousands of feet in height. So much on the subject of energy. Chapter 6, Weak Points and Strong. Sun Tzu said, "Whoever is first in the field and awaits the coming of the enemy will be fresh for the fight. And whoever is second in the field and has to hasten to the battle, he will arrive exhausted. Therefore, the clever combatant imposes his will on the enemy, but he does not allow the enemy's will to be imposed on him. By holding out advantages to him, he can cause the enemy to approach of his own accord. Or by inflicting damage, he can make it impossible for the enemy to draw near. So if the enemy is taking his ease, he can harass him. If well supplied, he can starve him out. And if quietly encamped, he can force him to move. Appear at points which the enemy must hasten to defend. March swiftly to places where you are not expected. An army may march great distances without distress if it marches through country where the enemy is not. And you can be sure of succeeding in your attacks if you attack places which are not defended. You can ensure the safety of your own defense if you hold only positions that cannot be attacked. Hence, the general is skillful in attack whose opponent does not know where to defend or what to defend. And he is skillful in defense whose opponent does not know what to attack. Brackets. An aphorism which puts the whole art of war in a nutshell. What's an aphorism? It's a concise statement of a scientific principle. So the brackets are telling us that Giles says the general is skillful in attack whose opponent doesn't know what to defend. In other words, where's this guy going to hit? And he's skillful in defense whose opponent does not know what to attack. Where do I hit him? Giles is telling us this is the whole art of war in a nutshell. Subtlety and secrecy. O divine art of subtlety and secrecy. Through you, we learn to be invisible. Through you, inaudible. And hence we hold the enemy's fate in our hands. You may advance and be absolutely irresistible if you make for the enemy's weak points. And you may retire, retreat, and be safe from pursuit if your movements are more rapid than those of your enemy. Now, if we wish to fight the enemy can be forced to an engagement, even though he be sheltered behind a high rampart or deep ditch. All we need to do is attack some other place which he will be obliged to relieve. And if we do not wish to fight, we can prevent the enemy from engaging us, even though the lines of our encampment be merely traced on the ground. All we need to do is to throw something unused, unaccountable in his way. By discovering the enemy's dispositions and remaining invisible ourselves, we can keep our forces concentrated, while the enemy must be divided. We can form a single united body, while the enemy must split up into fractions. Hence, there will be a whole pitted against separate parts of a whole, which means that we shall be many in collected mass to the enemy's separate few amongst his separate parts. And if we are thus able to attack an inferior force with a superior one, our opponents will be in dire straits. Battle site secrecy. The spot where we intend to fight must not be known, for then the enemy will have to prepare against the possible attack at several points, different points, and his forces thus, being thus distributed into many directions, the numbers that we shall have to face at any given point will be proportionately few. Bracket. General Sheridan once explained the reason of Grant's victories by saying that, quote, while his opponents were kept busy wondering what Grant was going to do, he was thinking most about what he himself was going to do. Close the brackets. For should the enemy strengthen his van, the front, he will be weakened in his rear. And should he strengthen his rear, he will be weakened in his van. And should he strengthen his left, he will be weak on his right. And should he strengthen his right, he will be weak in the left. And if he sends reinforcements everywhere, he will be everywhere weak. Bracket. Frederick the Great, in his instructions to his generals, says, quote, those generals who have had but little experience attempt to protect every point, while those who are better acquainted with their profession, they guard against decisive blows at decisive points, and they acquiesce in smaller misfortunes to avoid greater misfortunes. End quote. In other words, keep away from sideshows. Don't be distracted from your objective. Close the brackets. Numerical weakness comes from having to prepare against possible attacks. Numerical strength, compelling our adversary to make these preparations against us. Knowing the place and time of a coming battle, we may concentrate from great distances in order to fight. But if neither the time nor the place be known, then the left wing will be impotent to succor the right, and the right equally impotent to succor the left, and the van unable to relieve the rear, and the rear to support the van. How much more so if the furthest portions of the army are anything under 100 li apart, and even the nearest are separated by several li? Though according to my estimation, the soldiers of you exceed our own in number, that shall advantage them nothing in the matter of victory. I say then, victory can be achieved. Though the enemy be stronger in numbers, we may prevent him from fighting, and we must scheme so as to discover his plans and the likelihood of their success. Seeking enemy's weakness. Rouse him, the enemy, and learn the principle of his activity and inactivity. Force him to reveal himself so as to find out his vulnerable spots. And then carefully compare the opposing army with our own, so that you may know where strength is superabundant and where it is deficient. In making your tactical dispositions, the highest pitch you can attain is to conceal them. Conceal your dispositions, and you will be safe from the prying of the subtlest of spies, from the machinations of the wisest brains. And how victory may be produced by this from the enemy's own tactics is what the multitude cannot comprehend. All men can see these tactics whereby I conquer, but what none can see is the strategy out of which this victory is evolved. See, these arrows, don't forget, Jimmy's arrows tell you to pay attention, particular attention. You can pause it and write it down, then restart it. Do not repeat the tactics which have gained you one victory. Just let your methods be regulated by the infinite variety of circumstances. That's very important. Tactics are fluid. Military tactics are like unto water. For water, in its natural course, runs away from high places and hastens downwards. And so in war, the way to avoid what is strong is to strike what is weak. Water shapes its course according to the ground over which it flows. The soldier works out of his victory in relationship to the foe whom he is facing, and therefore, just as water retains no constant shape, so in warfare there are no constant conditions. Very important. So he who can modify his tactics in relation to his opponent and thereby succeed in winning may be called a heaven-born captain. And now the 5 elements, brackets, water, fire, wood, metal, earth, are not always equally prominent. The 4 seasons make way for each other in turn, and there are short days and long, and the moon has its period of waning and waxing. In other words, nothing stays the same. Chapter 7, Maneuvering an Army. Sun Tzu said, in war, the general receives his commands from the sovereign. And having collected an army and concentrated his forces, he, the general, must blend and harmonize the different elements thereof before pitching his camp. And after that comes tactical maneuvering, that which there is nothing more difficult. The difficulty of tactical maneuvering consists in turning the devious into the direct and misfortune into gain. Brackets. Signal examples of this saying are afforded by the 2 famous passages across the Alps, that of Hannibal, who laid Italy at his mercy, and that of Napoleon, 2,000 years later, which resulted in a great victory at Marengo. And you can look those up. The Germans' use of the impenetrable Ardennes in 1940 turned the devious into the direct with a vengeance. These are all military examples of Sun Tzu's wisdom, and when we analyze Sun Tzu, The Art of War, in the full analysis, Jimmy will bring up additional examples of battles that have been fought using Sun Tzu. Thus, to take a long, circuitous route after enticing the enemy out of the way, and though starting after him, to contrive to reach the goal before him, shows knowledge of the artifice, the art of deviation. Deviation. Maneuvering with an army is advantageous, but with an undisciplined multitude, it's most dangerous. And if you set a fully equipped army in march in order to snatch an advantage, the chances are you will be too late. On the other hand, to detach a flying column for the purpose involves the sacrifice of its baggage and its stores. Thus, if you order your men to make forced marches without halting day or night, covering double the usual distance at a stretch, and doing 100 li in order to wrest an advantage, the leaders of your 3 divisions will fall into the hands of the enemy. The strongest men will be in front, and the jaded ones will fall behind, and thus, by this, only 1/10 of your army will reach its destination. And if you march 50 li, in order to outmaneuver the enemy, you are going to lose the leader of your first division, and only half of your force will reach its goal. And if you march 30 li with the same object, 2/3 of your army will arrive. I want you to note the word Jimmy put here, calculations. Sun Tzu does his math, doesn't he? Losing tactics. We may take it, then, that an army without its baggage train is lost. Without provisions, it is lost. Without basis of supply, it is lost. We cannot enter into alliances until we are acquainted with the designs of our neighbors. We are not fit to lead an army on the march unless we are familiar with the face of the country, its mountains, forests, pitfalls. We shall be unable to turn natural advantage to account unless we make use of local guides. In war, practice dissimulation, and you will succeed. Move only if there is a real advantage to be gained. Whether to concentrate or divide your troops must be decided by circumstances. Let your rapidity be that of the wind, your compactness that of the forest, and in raiding and plundering be like fire, in immovability like a mountain. And keep your plans dark and impenetrable like the night, and when you do move, fall like a thunderbolt. And when you plunder a countryside, let the spoil be divided amongst your men. And when you capture new territory, cut it up into allotments for the benefit of the soldiery. Ponder and deliberate before you make a move. He will conquer who has learned the art of deviation. Such is the art of maneuvering. Gongs, drums, banners, and flags. The Book of Army Management, bracket, this is an unknown book according to Giles, bracket, says, on the field of battle, the spoken word does not carry far enough, and hence the institution of gongs and drums. Nor can ordinary objects be seen clearly enough, and hence the institutions of banners and flags. Gongs and drums, banners and flags, are the means whereby the ears and eyes of the host may be focused on one particular point. Note Jimmy's note. They're using this for communications. The host, thus forming a single, united body, it is impossible either for the brave to advance alone or for the cowardly to retreat alone. Thus is the art of handling large masses of men. And in night fighting, then, make much use of signal fires and drums. And in fighting by day, the use of flags and banners as a means of guiding your men through the ears and eyes. A whole army may be robbed of its sprint, and a commander-in-chief may be robbed of his presence of mind. So now a soldier's spirit is keenest in the morning, and by noonday has it begun to flag, and in the evening his mind is only bent on returning to camp. So a clever general, therefore, avoids an army when its spirit is keen, but he attacks it when it is sluggish and inclined to retreat. This is the art of studying moods, self-possession and strength. Discipline and calm, to await the appearance of disorder and hubbub amongst the enemy. This is the art of retaining self-possession. To be near the goal while the enemy is still far from it, to wait at ease while the enemy is toiling and struggling, to be well fed while the enemy is famished, this is the art of husbanding one's strength. To refrain from intercepting an enemy whose ranks are in perfect order, to refrain from attacking an army drawn up in calm and confident array, This is the art of studying circumstances. It is a military axiom not to advance uphill against the enemy, nor to oppose him when he comes downhill. Do not pursue an enemy who simulates flight, and do not attack soldiers whose temper is keen. Do not swallow bait offered by the enemy, and do not interfere with an army that is retreating into its own territory. And when you surround an army, leave an outlet free. Do not press a desperate foe too hard. Such is the art of warfare. You've been reading with Jimmy. This is Jimmy. We've been reading Sun Tzu, chapter 5, 6, and 7 of The Art of War. Aren't you enjoying it? There's other classics on my website, right? readingwithjimmy.com. Hope you check them out. I'm also on YouTube. And remember, if you have any comments, questions, email, anything at all, Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com, Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com. Onward and upward, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for being here. We will continue with the rest of Sun Tzu shortly. Please join me.